probably most of you know where Holt Copse is. It's opposite St Paul's Church, Holt Lane and Jubilee Avenue, and this is the wood where I've been doing most of the observations. I'm a member of Holt Copse Conservation Volunteers, and we look after Holt Copse on behalf of Wokingham Town Council, who own it. The group was formed in 1999, and if anyone says briefly, how would you describe what you do? I will say we manage it for the benefit of people and for wildlife. What we do can really be classified into 3, perhaps 4 areas. Woodland management. Nothing had been done in Holt Copse for about 40 years before the group was formed. So we do a lot of clearing of holly, which was tending to take over in many parts of the wood, coppicing hazel, planting more trees as necessary. The main path through the wood used to be very muddy, so we've improved that, and we've built 2 bridges in the wood across the ditch into the grassland area adjacent. We like to try and teach people a bit about the wildlife that's in the wood, and we've put up, I think, 16 Nature Watch signs which illustrate the birds, the mammals, flowers, and some of the insects that you get in Holt Copse. And we've done things to encourage wildlife, and that's what I'm really going to be talking about this morning. And in particular, what we've done in the way of putting up nest boxes and the results we've got. We've put a whole series of boxes up that are designed to attract a range of species. Most of the boxes are ones that blue tits, great tits and coal tits like, but we've also put up boxes that are suitable for nuthatches, tree creepers and owls. We have tawny owls in the wood, and anyone who's been there in the evening at this time of the year will likely to hear them. The nest boxes, you've probably all put up wooden nest boxes, but we've tended to go for ones which are said to be made of woodcrete, which is a mixture of concrete and wood. The concrete gives the strength, and they do last a long time as long as they're not vandalised, and I've got one there which you can look at afterwards. And the wood provides insulation, and they're also about so thick, so they are very popular with birds. Most of the ones we put up are this design, and the vast majority of those are used every year. What we do at this time of the year is we check all the nest boxes to see whether they were used or not. We record whether there are any unhatched eggs or dead chicks there. We look at the nest material because that gives you an idea of what species nested there. And then we remove the nest and give it a good clean, because the nests are full of parasites of one sort or another. And when I was researching this talk, I found that clip on the notice board there, and I think that justifies the procedure that we do every year to clean out the nests. That's quite phenomenal. I don't think any of our nests have had that sort of number, but my good wife sitting there, she does know that there are fleas in these nests, because once when I took some home and she was cleaning up round the nests, she came into the kitchen with her legs all bitten, and I think you found 40 bites. Anyway, so we check the nests every year. A high percentage of the nests are used each year. The small whole bird boxes like that are highly popular, and most are used every year. The wooden boxes that most of us have probably made and put up, they're not nearly as popular. I think principally because the sides are thin, and I'm sure it's the thick walls of those things which make them so attractive. The boxes that we put up to attract tree creepers are sometimes used, but in most cases not by tree creepers, but by blue or great tits. They don't seem to know they're supposed to stick to these nest boxes, and they'll nest in the tree creeper boxes and in the nuthatch boxes. You'll see we've put 2 owl boxes up in the wood, and in 2020 both were used, but in previous years only one was ever used at in any one season. Sometimes it was one, sometimes it was the other, and I think that, but both were never used because they were sited quite close together, and tawny owls are highly territorial, and I think they were too close together and were within the same territory. When we moved one of the boxes to the far end of the wood, that was probably deemed to be another territory, and as I say, in 2020 both of the boxes were used. I'd like to now show you a bit about the nests and what we found. That's quite often what we see when we are about to clean one of the nest boxes. The nest, if it's a blue tit or great tit nest, there's nearly always some moss and grass in there, but in some nests you get quite a lot of man-made materials. Oh, this shows you a sort of clip of what the fronts of these boxes look like before we've cleaned them. Those are the cocoons of a small moth that we nearly always find in the boxes. That's a typical blue tit nest where the birds aren't particularly interested in colour and man-made materials. You'll see it's all just either grass or moss, quite a lot of droppings, and a very flat nest. And sometimes blue tit nests are very rudimentary and often full of droppings, whereas great tit nests are a different shape. Others contains a certain amount of man-made materials, and others even more, and that I think is the nest that we found that had the largest amount of man-made material. You see it's a different shape from the first ones I showed you. It's really cup-shaped, and that's typical of great tits. The great tit parents are much more house-proud than blue tits are, and there's never, in our experience anyway, hardly ever any droppings in a nest that was built by great tits. Those are boxes that are sold as designed for nuthatches. We usually find 2 each season are used by nuthatches, but more often than not, blue tits or great tits have used them. Nuthatch nests are totally different, as you can see. It's made up of just bits of bark, twig and leaf, and it's not bound together in any sort of way. So when we're opening up these boxes, it's not difficult to tell what sort of bird has used them in the past. The other feature about nuthatch nests is that if they've nested somewhere where the hole they think is a bit bigger than they need, and they're worried that predators might get in, they will plaster it up with a mixture of mud and saliva, which sets really hard, just like concrete, much the same sort of way that swifts, swallows and house martins build their nests out of mud. And they sort of block off the hole so it's just the right size. That's the inside where it lined the thing. That's one of the owl boxes that I mentioned, and they're big. They're at least that sort of size. And when they're used, when we come to clean them, they're full up to about that sort of level with their nest material, which is rather revolting. It's a mixture of twigs, leaves, which at the bottom is fairly clean and not so revolting, but the top is a crust of mixture of probably of droppings and old food, and the whole thing looks rather revolting. Because it's bone dry, it doesn't usually smell, but it does look very unsightly. Birds aren't the only things that we find in the nests. Quite often there'll be a mouse present, and sometimes when you're opening it up and it suddenly leaps out at you, it doesn't half make you jump. One year we found a box with a colony of bees in it, And the combs that they've made, I thought, looked absolutely spectacular. And that colony survived for 2 seasons, but then for some reason or other it died out, and the combs eventually crumbled away, I think because they were eaten by mites. But I thought that just looks lovely. So when we opened that up, we didn't disturb it, we just put the front back on again. And as I say, it lasted for 2 years. We were intrigued by all the man-made material that we sometimes found in the nests. And we wondered really just how far the birds foraged for nesting material. So one year we did a very simple experiment. We cut up short lengths of red wool, about so long, and put them in a net which we hung up in the wood. We did that in the spring, and then come the autumn when we were checking the nests, we recorded where we'd found bits of wool. As you might expect, we found most bits of wool in nests that were nearby, but we did find some much further away. And if you look carefully at that slide which I showed you earlier, I think you can perhaps see there's a bit of red wool there. I think that's a bit, that's another bit, and I think there was one more bit up there somewhere. And that was at least 120 metres away from where we hung up the nest. So they will forage quite a long way. We still don't know really how they find all that material, because Holt Copse isn't such a scruffy place with all sorts of old clothes lying about all over the place, but somehow those birds found a lot of material that they liked. The yellow, I think we do know about. That's the fluff off tennis balls that get lost regularly in the wood when dog waters are there and the dogs don't find the balls. But where some of the other stuff comes from, I just don't know. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you found some of that interesting. And afterwards, if you'd like to have a look at some of the things there, you'll see the actual nests I've shown you. And there's some books which you might like to look at. Anyway, thank you.